Welcome, Heidi, and I believe Brittany. Well, I'm going to begin class, and looks like we're all on it. So if you don't have your vid screens on, please turn them on. And I'd like to just start with a chant. And I'll invite you to meditate for a moment and listen in. And this is a chant to Saraswati. So go ahead and find a comfortable seated posture. You can close your eyes if you wish, sitting upright. Just bring your mind into presence, whether it be an internal or external, listening to sound, listening to your own breath. Ya kundendu tushara hara davala, ya shubra vastra vrita, ya vina varadanda manditakara, ya sveta padmasana, ya brahmachyuta shankara prabhritir Deva sada vandita samam patu saraswati bhagavati nishesha jalya paha. So this prayer, I'm going to translate it. So it's a prayer to Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Oh, the bright one, like the garland of dewdrops of the moon, who wears a white garment, transmitting pure white energy of knowledge, giving gestures with her vina, symbol of humility, and ornamented hands, who is white and who sits on a lotus pose in a white lotus, who is unchangeable, who is worshipped by Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer, also called Shankara. May she protect me from the darkness of ignorance and remove the heaviness and dullness from my consciousness. So it's a prayer that interacts with a lot of the knowledge that we're learning. And Saraswati is one of the deities, let's say, or guardians of the Ayurvedic knowledge, part of the Ayurveda, as well as all fine arts too, and knowledge that can be passed along. So I'd like to welcome everybody to this class, and it's an important subject today. I'd like to just go over a little bit of the objectives, but before I say anything, the first class and then this class, there's going to be a lot of, as you've seen in your reading, a lot of lists, a lot of kind of scattered knowledge that doesn't have a necessarily clear, obvious, simple thread, but a lot of overlap, right? A lot of overpasting and refining and subtlety of meanings. My hope, though, at the end of this class is to give you a perspective that is pretty lucid and clear and a direction forward. This class actually will be something that there'll be a bit of repetition for those of you that go on to be Ayurvedic practitioners, because it'll be the core of how you will be studying diseases, likely for the rest of your lives. The way that you think about it, the way you classify them, the way that you really are able to express, if you're going on to teaching or if you're looking in ancient text, how they're described. And I would say properly too, and in a great fullness. Another aspect of this class is you'll be learning some skills of how to, with discrimination, choose resources, let's say from the internet, that you are, when you look up a case that you don't know a disease, how to find an article that actually contains all the information that you really do need to help with that. So it's an important one. So I'm going to begin with talking about the definition of health, which I know is a bit of a review for some of you, but the next thing is we're going to talk about the definition of disease, and then go into classifications of disease. from various texts, whether that be from Charaka, Samshruta, or Bhagavat. And then we're going to talk about prognosis, basically the outcome of treatment. Is it easy to heal this disease or that disease? And then I'd like to kind of come back to something that we left off in class 1, because it's a little more relevant for this, is that concept of samprapti as opposed to the samyak samprapti, which we went over last class. But the whole really idea from Panchaka Nidanam, the 5 clinical barometers of samprapti, is it gives us some important nuggets of what do we really know? Like, what do we have to think about in our heads to classify disease and treat it properly? And this will kind of go on to how we're going to speak, research, and identify all the different areas that we need to properly have a good knowledge and ability to treat diseases. Okay, so it's a very, very useful class. We're going to bring together everything into a concrete form. And in fact, that's going to be part of your homework that's going to be posted later, is to actually start classifying diseases. I'll be asking to start doing that. We're also going to cover lakshanam. Again, just kind of briefly speak about that concept of signs and symptoms. So we can like further refine that so you can understand. We're finishing off this segment, this 3-class segment. There will be a quiz actually after this that'll be posted too on the first 3 classes. And we're about to transition into the segment of actually having a form, an intake form, and learning how to have the skills of asking, observing, and palpating to some extent, of how to work with clients. Okay, actually refining our skills of assessment and intake. That's going to be the next segment of our learning, which is a very, very important transition. Before I go on with this subject, I'd like to just kind of ask you all a couple questions and kind of open it up for questions with you too. But let me go ahead and just ask a little bit about your homework. So you've been having. How's everybody doing with the doshas of the season? Which doshas are accumulating and provoked? I want to see if there's any questions about that or any way that we can make clarity, because it's an important exercise. And I ask you to think about it a little deeper than it's normally presented. No questions? Everybody got the exercise pretty easily? Each season, which dosha is being accumulated, and then which one is provoked and which one is pacified for spring, summer, fall? Yeah. Okay, so I think I gave you a good example, but yeah, Heidi.
I'm sorry. So spring is like damp and kind of still cool, right? So wouldn't that be kapha? Or
generically, yes.
Okay.
But we always have to ask, what is it carrying into itself? What is changing? And what is being pacified? 3 things. Each season has 3 important doshic effects.
So we're coming out of winter,
which is
cold and damp, right?
Which is what dosha?
That's kapha, right?
Yeah, so winter is when kapha is accumulating.
Right.
Yeah.
So then it starts to, okay.
Yeah, and then so it is in like classically in Ayurveda, or when you apply it to the West, it's kapha and pitta. Pitta is beginning to arise. So if kapha was accumulating in winter, it'd be provoked in spring. Second stage is samprapti. At the same time, pitta is starting to accumulate in spring, right? Things are starting to run, things are starting to melt, heat's starting to come up in spring, right? But it still is having that carryover. And then of the kapha. And then what is being pacified?
Vata.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right? Not at the seasonal changes, right? Because those are times of vata, but once it's in full effect, pitta, kapha will very well do a good job on vata due to their qualities. Now, this is a generalization, right? Because we each all live in different climates. Like if you go to Bali, if you go to other places in the world, totally different thing. If you go to Hawaii, there's no, it's pretty much the same thing all the time, more or less, with very little variation. So, so this is generalization. We have to apply this to where we live and where we treat people. But if we understand the concepts, then we can easily start applying them. Okay. Anybody else? Any other confusion about other seasons? I want to make sure you all understand that triple concept of seasons and how they affect us. Because there are allies or our foes for everything we offer to clients. Right? So it's important to think about that. Great, great, okay. Next, how are self-care exercises you've been assigned to do that kind of correspond to your first, third, 3 stages of property issues? Things going well? Have you tried a few new things or been able to like begin to start balancing some of that stuff? Everybody's been too busy to do any of that.
Well, the one thing that I've been doing that's helping me a little bit is get more on a schedule, like waking up at the same time every day. Because over the summer, I kind of just was crazy. My schedule was chaotic. And so now I'm trying to get more routine. Okay, you're going to wake up at the same time every day. You're going to do the same activities. And it is helping.
Is it a seasonal transition where you are?
Yes, we're heading into fall. I live in
Yes.
the Midwest.
Okay, yeah. So there is a mobile quality, right? All of us, like especially if we have kids or we're going into different or going to school, etc. There's that transition. It's very concrete, right? Like we know outside everything's changing, not only the weather but our lives. So mobile guna may have arisen. Did you have any issues going on with mobile guna kind of arising and making it difficult? Yeah. So choosing that as a way to offset that is great, right? Yeah, Brittany.
I've been like soaking myself in olive oil,
Mhm.
and I feel like my skin has never been better. And I've always just been so dry
Mm.
all the time. And it's crazy that right now sadly it's fall, and my skin's still, well, when I put on the olive oil, I'm not as dry as usual.
Yeah, is it a drier season in France where you are?
Yeah, it's so weird. It's like tropical in the summertime, and then in
Yeah,
the winter, it's just super dry.
yeah. But in the fall, that's transition. You're starting to feel that dryness come on. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, great. Well, absolutely. So this is the onset of Vata. Not only seasonally changed, but it is the Vata season come on. So Vata is just beginning to accumulate, right?
Hmm.
And you're getting the dryness guna, right? And however, if you were inside a lot and you weren't in that humidity for some reason, then that dryness could have come from the heat dryness too. So it depends where you live. That's probably not the case in France, but if you lived in like high desert, that would be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, they're very very good. I want to make sure that this is that concept of desha of our climate is really really important. And the more years I practice, the more I see how clearly tied it is to aggravations of symptoms, diseases, etc. in clients. And how it really helps if used properly, if we do the right treatments at the right time and are supported by that, it just makes them that much more successful. So Abhyang in the fall, if you live in a drier fall climate, is wonderful. It's twice as strong, so it's a great time to get people to do it. Excellent. Let's go ahead and begin our subject matter. I want to start out with asking you all a question. Essentially, what are your definitions of health? Or maybe I should ask, since you probably have the Ayurvedic one in mind, like what were the definitions of health that you came into before that you had previously to learning about Ayurveda? No.
I'd say it was an absence of disease was a healthy person.
Yeah, that's a very common one. No. How about anybody else?
I would say the same as Brittany. Just before coming into this, it was just if you didn't have any diseases, you were healthy.
Yeah, yeah. And again, that's really common. So I like asking this question because, all of us have a certain idea, and that comes on. There are many definitions of it. I have one from the World Health Organization. Oh, and I'm actually a little impressed. I think it's been updated in the recent years to reflect this. But from the World Health Organization, complete mental, physical, and social state of well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So they're like, okay, let's move on here. However, they're not including spiritual, are they? Interesting. It's like, well, we don't want to go on that subject yet. But at least it's a little more broader, right? And they include social. So they're starting to look at more of the quote unquote wellness models of health. And in these days, of kind of like a lot of research and words that are big out there, wellness is a big thing. So that usually includes all those spheres. Let's take a look at the Ayurvedic definition of health. One of the classic ones that comes from Sushruta Samhita, one of the great teachers and texts. Samadosha samagnischa samadatu malakriyaha prasannant mendriya manaswasta ityabidyate. So this sutra, I'm pretty confident you've probably all heard it before, but it's one of the most classic ways of talking about health. And literally translated, one of the ways is the one who is established in self with a big S, who has balanced doshas, balanced agni, properly formed dhatus, proper elimination of malas, properly functioning bodily processes, and whose mind, soul, and senses are full of bliss is called a healthy person. Right? Wow. And I must say, this is kind of fun to teach this to a class of people that have been studying Ayurveda for a long time. So I teach this often in introductory workshops, and they're like, whoa, what are all those words? But I don't have to explain anything, right? Look at all that's included in that. Right? Now, there's a couple ways we can look at this definition. This could be depressing, or it could be very enlightening. Right? And I'm assuming that Sushruta did not mean it to make us feel bad about ourselves or depressed. Right? As in, which would be a common way to take this, would be like, oh, shoot, I have a long way to go, right? My mala is not doing good. My agni is not doing good. I'm not established in self, or my soul is not in bliss at every moment. Ooh, I'm unhealthy. That's totally not the way that this is to be taken at all. When I present this, I like to speak about it like a solar system. This definition is like the sun radiating our potential. We are like planets or moons revolving around that, but our course isn't exactly circular. Sometimes we go right through that and experience that. And then our orbit takes us sometimes very far away, and we don't experience much of those things. Sometimes for a while, we're orbiting really close to that and crossing through that. And sometimes it's erratic. Sometimes we're way out there and then kind of swerving back in. What I mean by that is, have you, not all of you experienced this exact state several times in your life? Yeah, we all have, right? Probably fall in love before. It kind of feels like that, right? You may have had pre-existing conditions. They all just go away, right? Everything, that doesn't matter anymore, right? It's all gone. You feel great, right? There's many times in our life that we've experienced this. So this is a state of coordinated being. It's not a permanent fixed state. It's a state that we can experience, and then it's fleeting though. And I like to look at Ayurveda as a science of inviting us to orbit closer to that state more frequently. How can we take the right steps in the right direction that allows our orbit to get closer to that? It doesn't mean we have to sit there, because we're dynamic, we're living, we're alive. We're adapting all the time, so we can't be in that state all the time. But how is it that we can maybe orbit closer to that slowly and steadily? Right? as opposed to let it be all random. Right. So I'd just like to open up for reflecting on that. Does that make sense? Is any comments on that? And most importantly, just whenever we present Ayurveda or that definition too, is like just to be really careful of that. In no way should we make anyone feel like there's an inferiority or like, oh wow, I'm not there. Oh my God, you're there, or any of that. That's so not what it's meant to be, right? It's a happy thing. It's a potential that everyone should be able to recognize throughout their life, and then invite them to step back towards that. Would you like to feel like that more often? Right? So definition. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the World Health Organization definition is deficient in that it doesn't really talk about spiritual well-being, and social can mean a lot of things. Do they mean you have friends and family around? Are they saying you need to have money, or social status?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
Completely, I find that to be a little vague, as well as concerning, in that we have a very materialistic society that kind of has this idea that if you arrive, if you have certain material things, and that will make you happy, but it doesn't make you happy. We've had very famous celebrity suicides recently, and they are, Anthony Bourdain and what's the woman with the purses? I can't remember her name, but anyway, so I think that this society that we live in is very spiritually sick, and we have more and more anger, more and more distrust of everybody, more and more hatred on all sides, and it's really killing people in terms of their souls. And I don't know what's going to fix that, but I at least think that the Ayurvedic definition speaks to that a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
Because to me, that's like the crucial component. I mean, when you're asking about the stuff earlier, it's like I'm already in stage 5 of illness, and it's interesting because I'm going to go off on a tangent on my own stuff for a moment, but I just got diagnosed with reactivated Epstein-Barr virus, which explains a lot of my other symptoms, right? So there's this part of me that's kind of focusing, okay, I got to like kill the virus, I'm just going to have to try to do that. And I do have some question for you later about like how does Ayurveda look at that sort of thing? But the other side of it is that, like,
let's just for a moment, let's take it back to the definition of health. Is you are able to experience this state of health at any moment, even if you had stage like 3 cancer, 4 cancer, right? This is possible. There are moments that things coordinate and work well, and then there's moments that the orbit's out there, and that's the beauty of this. And I think knowing that is part of the solution to what we're speaking about here.
Yeah,
that it's not once we're on a train, that train doesn't mean we've left the orbit permanently or for a long time. We're able to get back to that at any instant if we have tools, and also there's grace that carries us there, and everything's all in the right place.
That kind of brings me to what I was just going to say, is that that's actually, in some ways, that's the most challenging part of what I'm dealing with right now, is the spiritual aspect of it and the emotional aspect of it, because I am getting better slowly, but it's brought up all of this stuff in terms of like, how I relate to the world and how I relate to stress and how I'm letting things stress me out, how I have to filter out like my body's natural, be aware of that versus getting worked up about it. And so getting that peace of mind, particularly when there's this like matrix of media that we're all plugged into, that I think it's mostly toxic on all sides. It's just constant negativity that's put at you. You turn on the television, it's negative. You turn on the internet, it's negative.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of potential, and the way that we receive that and our choices to be exposed to that are both relevant in that aspect. Let me just kind of conclude with one thing that's very, very important to see in this too is going back to the World Health Organization. I'm going to stay on the good side of that. They probably chose the social in the light of a lot of the research nowadays has shown that the single greatest thing for your happiness is to have a good, solid, complete social network that you feel supports you, which is huge. I'm going to guess that they base it off there because they usually do things like that about their current research, and that's good news. Right, that's a great thing of modern day science looks at of like, wow, look how important this is to people's health and longevity. And Ayurveda completely agrees with that, right? Those interconnections. So despite all this that's going on in the world and what would maybe be portrayed, what is the most important? Our ability to connect with each other and be real in times of difficulty, to extend a helping hand, to serve, to love. Right? That's always been the answer. And that's always happened after every great disaster or thing that's happened. So we have that innate nature, you know, and it's like, and I think more and more of us are being called forth to do that, right? Being called forth to extend that hand. And here you are studying about something that is a direct vehicle of that hand, right? So beautiful. Let me go ahead and kind of get into the subject matter too, so we can do that, and we can keep kind of winding these questions through. Okay, thank you, Steph. Let's talk about the definition of disease now, and give some ideas about them, because there's so many definitions of disease out there and so many synonyms. Now, first and foremost, definition of disease, so vyakti, right? So or vyadi, so disease. You know, that's one word for it in Ayurveda, and there's tremendous amount of synonyms that are out there. Roga, vikara, jwara, papma, takman, and these are all things that come out of, you've seen it in the Ayurvedic textbook that we're reading. You can kind of find a whole list. I'm not going to go over all of them, but it just shows that there's so many ways of looking at it, and so many ways of looking at it due to what we've experienced in our lives about it. There's ways of looking at disease from different people's perspectives, and even climatically, where certain cultures get a lot more certain diseases, and some cultures get none of this, so they have no idea about these things, right? Old diseases that have been cured or that no longer exist, new diseases that are coming and arising. Now, in Ayurveda, there's a couple common definitions of disease. Another good word to use, of course, is vikruti, right? Imbalance, because that's the beginning of disease. A couple things that we can think of as well, if our health is not, if we're not in that definition, then there's some disturbance. Disturbed ease, right? Ill health, disturbed inner balance. These are all pieces of that. Now, this comes down to signs and symptoms. And I've spoken about to you about signs as something that's observable to another, like a practitioner, and symptoms is something that's totally subjective, that we express or we feel, right? We have a sense. And sometimes it's very subtle, but you just have a sense that I'm fighting something or something's not totally well. So the word disease, in order for something to be a disease, it necessarily needs to be tangible. There needs to be something objective about it, which is a good, interesting definition. And that's commonly the one in the modern world is like, unless a doctor can really see it and kind of classify it, and they're not going to say it's a disease, right? So in Ayurvedic sense, what are we talking about? Unless there's rupa, it's not technically a disease, right, in the fullest meaning of that word. Doesn't mean that there isn't an imbalance. It just means that there isn't a disease. Right? We haven't gone to Sthana Samshray Vyakti Beda yet. We haven't reached that stage. So it's a profound knowing. So first of all, I'd like you all to have that in mind. When you hear the word disease, think this is gone beyond that stage. It's now classifiable because there's signs and symptoms that correspond to something that we're familiar with or not. Okay, so that's point number one, so subjective. An illness is a modern way of saying that that someone is suffering, they're under distress, but it's not necessarily a disease yet. Those words get mixed up a lot, but I'd like to clarify that. In the sense that in an Ayurveda, that may be some Purvarupa, that may be early signs, basically dosha lakshanam, like signs of doshas being unbalanced, signs of Agni being unbalanced, but it's not a disease yet. We as Ayurvedic practitioners, you as Ayurvedic wellness counselors, really fly in that place. And that's essentially where I really encourage you to be very good, get your knowledge down well, so you can help people and prevent disease. Right? Every doctor should be trained in this well, and they're not. Right? They're trained well in Vyakti Beta and dealing with that. But to be a holistic practitioner, to treat things in the fullness, we need to know of how to prevent this and get at it at its root before it starts going there. So those are some very, very important. I'm going to keep the rest of our training here on, I'm going to be referring to these ideas so you know where you are and you know what the language is. But I'm also trying to give you an idea of some of the languaging in modern medicine too. So when people come in speaking that, because you're going to encounter a lot of people like, I just don't feel well, but my doctor's like, whatever, come back when you actually have an issue. Right? Well, we could be helping them tremendously. Right? I mean, I think that's a common experience. How many of you experience that? You call up the doctor and they're like, maybe take 2 pills of aspirin, call me in the morning, see how you feel. Hopefully it goes away.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So a lot of people experience anxiety, like panic attacks.
Yeah.
That I know of in our society today.
Yeah.
And they run to the doctor, they think they're having a heart attack, and they have all these physical symptoms. The doctor says, there's nothing physically wrong with you, take a sedative and go home.
Right.
But in Ayurveda, like if you're having a rapid heartbeat and you're out of breath and you're having all this stuff, is that something? That's something.
Yeah, of course it is. It's definitely first, second, third stage.
Yeah.
And it may be bordering on fourth stage, depending on Purvarupa, but the doctor's waiting for you to show signs of a heart attack. Whereas we're like, this could lead to a heart attack if you go this way. Let's take some preventative measures. Yeah? So absolutely. So that's the next thing I was going to talk about, is just to refine objective and subjective. Objective is measurable signs, and that's what the doctor's looking for. Like, you have high blood pressure. You have a weird liver count. You have high cholesterol, and that comes out in your test. You have pain in the upper right side that's tingling down your arm. Yeah, that's a sign of a heart attack, right? Those are objective, either through tests or through seeing. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to interrupt real quick, because I've had this experience in this last year, because I went to the ER many times because I was having tachycardia. And one of the times I went, the female doctor actually just wrote off what I was experiencing as a panic attack. And I was trying to tell her, like, no, I have this other stuff going on. And she didn't really understand. So, when I went home and looked at the paperwork, panic attack was on there. And they actually gave me information about a panic attack. I had to go to the neurologist to get a different test done to be confirmed that I actually had POTS, which caused the tachycardia. And of course, now I know there's a viral component that's causing the POTS. And so it took a long time of testing for Western medicine to validate what I already knew, which was this wasn't just anxiety. And unfortunately, they will write off a lot of,
So let's talk about why. So first of all, tachycardia is not a disease. Tachycardia is a symptom. It's an objective symptom, but it can go many directions. It could be Purvarupa, prodromal, many things. Heart attack, anxiety attack, you name it. There's a whole plethora. So for them, they have to make a guesswork. They don't know more of your background. They don't have more objective information. They can't take the next step forward, so they have to give just their best opinion, which the most common thing would be an anxiety attack. So that was not a bad guess. But then you saw another practitioner that ran further tests to gain further objective analysis, and then you found some other things that could lead to certain pathologies to get a diagnosis, right? So then it kind of it went into that stage of like classifying as disease, as opposed to the kind of pre-stage of an illness. Be, and Again, you've had a lot of subjective symptoms, but in modern medicine, until they see an objective that leads to disease, they're not going to classify you. It's frustrating. It's frustrating, and that's where we can fit in, is we listen to those subjective, as well as they do, of course, because those are symptoms of disease that can lead to it. But that's where our skill level is there, and we can do something about it very effectively.
Yeah, and
so can they if they're trained to, but they're not these days.
Women tend to have a problem where they're not taken as seriously, and that's why I even said it was a woman doctor. But even I've found the women doctors are sometimes harsher with me than the male doctors have been for some reason. But a lot of women who have things like POTS have that experience where they're like, no, there's something physical going on, and they're not being taken seriously by their doctors, and it's a frustrating long process.
Well,
so
one thing too is it's not about
either, because that anxiety can be on its own debilitating. But
yeah,
but
well, let me just check in here, because I want to make sure we're moving along with the class here. But I just want to say that remember that it's not necessarily that they're not taking you seriously, but in their training, they're not getting the training to see that as anything else until they have objective information. I think that's important to see that about doctors. It's not necessarily their fault. Sometimes it is, of course, but that's not what they're trained to do. And that's a big gap in our Western medical system that we are there to help and fill, right? And Ayurveda can offer that, and as well as many other holistic systems. And our hopes is that it gets into the modern medical, and that there is integrative health, and that when you come to a hospital, that there's also someone that can listen to it and be like, look, let's take some measures that help you out here while you're getting tested, so that you actually get some help, some real help, and you feel that, right? So very, very important. Very, very important. Okay. Now, I think it's very important to note that diseases can also be subjective and objective. Right? It's not that, okay, once they're objective, there isn't subjective complaints. They're both there. Right? However, subjective complaints often are the early purva rupa, or the early signs of the first few signs of doshas rising. Now, part of our jobs as Ayurvedic wellness counselors, as Ayurvedic practitioners, is also education, teaching people that, if you have a little gas, it is good to notice that. It's not normal. Or if you have, a little bit of cramping or excess bleeding for your menses, that's not the norm. Women can have a completely fine period. That's actually shows a high level of health, right? So being aware of these things, putting the pieces together and being preventative, knowing that, hey, these are some warning signs. Let's take care of this while we can, before it exacerbates and a few other streams come together to actually form a disease. Right? So very, very important. So a lot of us are going to be hearing subjective symptoms, and of course we're going to be hearing objective stuff. We're going to be faced with tests and everything, but that's usually a sign that the disease is farther on. But yet we can still help. We can still cut the roots of what's pushing that disease along, right? Let's look at some of the kind of classical definitions of disease. The most classical, I would say, is dosha, dusha, samurchana, janito, vyadi. So dosha. Doshas. Dusha is dhatus. Samurchana means there's a mixing, churning, amalgamation. And out of this mixing, churning of dosha with dhatu is born vyadi. It's the name of disease. So where does that happen? What stage? Samprapti? Not quite. That's spreading, right? That's before it's spreading. Yeah. Well, we got to hit if you go 4, that's a good bet. That's where it begins, right? That's where the battle is being fought. Sthana samshrayam, deposition. That's where the amalgamation starts. That's also where purva rupa gets pretty clear. And some rupa signs may think about it. Once you're in vyakti, stage 5, then you have the amalgamation is there. It's melded in. Right? The two different colored candles, wax is melted to create something else. And that's the classical definition of disease in Ayurveda. Okay, so we're there to hopefully help stall that, delay it, cut it at its root, or prevent that. Right? An Ayurvedic practitioner or doctor is there to then help draw that out and unamalgamate that. Right? That's like panchakarma. Does that make sense to everyone? Just open for questions with that. Right? It's a review of some of the things we've talked about, but in this context, it's important. The other alternative definition, there's many subtleties. I don't want you to think that that's the only way that disease can be caused. There's the whole subject of ama, right? Morbidity, toxicity, right? So ama, along with doshas, ultimately doshas are behind ama. Not always. There's environmental toxins, which aren't necessarily dosha specific, but toxins, etc., and ama is also responsible for disease. So a disease is often called ameya, born out of ama too. I want you to remember that too, because if you're only looking at that definition I gave you, then you're always like, well, it's always doshas. It can also be ama. Okay, it can also be ama. And that gets a little bit more into Western concepts of disease, because in Western, they almost, like, their generic definition of disease, as opposed to dosha is germs, viruses, bacteria, right? In Ayurveda, how do we see that? Well, for germs, virus, bacteria to get into and cause issues in our system, we have to have doshic imbalance and kavaigunya, but not always. Sometimes the pathogen's stronger than all that. So essentially, bacteria, viruses, germs, how they really hurt us is by causing ama. Yeah, that's how they hurt us. So that falls into the category of disease of ameya, born out of that. Brain break for a second. We kind of getting that? I'm seeing a little bit of blank faces. Ask a question.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I was reading Prakruti, and the author was saying something about how the Western doctor or person, we like to just completely remove, cut, and get rid of the bacteria or get rid of the whatever is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, yeah, but then I thought maybe because I'm Western, but it's like we don't want that bacteria. But then this makes sense with the Ayurveda, because it's not necessarily the bacteria that's bad, but it's the ama that the bacteria is giving.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, if our agnis are strong enough, right? Most of you, I think, sat in, or a good portion of you sat in on the agni class I gave, right? And you were kind of seeing that, yeah, agni is very important. So for agnis at that particular place that's being, the battle is being fought, is strong enough, it'll burn up the ama that's being created. It'll defeat possibly the organism, repel it, because it is your immune system, right? And there won't be an issue. That's why some people get sick, some people don't. The strength of the client, the strength of their ojas, the strength of their agnis, right? So Ayurveda understands that, gives us a model that we can work with that. Western medicine, it's like, it has its own way of working with that, right? Getting immunizations, getting boosters, all kinds of things to make you strong in a certain area, right? Boosters, shots are necessary for that, to make you strong in a certain area so that your agnis are strong for that particular thing, right? It's not a bad methodology. It works, right?
But aren't there certain pathogens and poisons that are just too strong, even if you have the strongest agni, like Ebola or cyanide or whatever it is?
It's a great question. Maybe, maybe not. I've seen people take serious poisons that would kill anybody, and they'd be fine, because they took something that would boost the agni to actually process it. It's a great question. It's like, is there a definite answer? I'd say 99% of the time, yes, there are certain things that are strong. But you know what? Even with those, some people do not get it, those serious things. Some people don't. Some people, and most people will, but some people don't. That's amazing. No matter how, the most serious disease in the world, there have been people that didn't get it when it hit through. It's true. You know, it's very interesting. Now, those diseases are really strong. There is a potential that someone has a stronger Agni of that Kava Gunya where that disease attacks. You know, grace. It's amazing, but it's important to account for that. And there's many ways in Ayurveda that actually have proven and shown that that is true. It's miraculous. Yeah.
So, do we ever want to treat the Agni then instead of the doshas? Because, like, what if you had one of those spiritual diseases, or what were we reading about on page 49? Like a curse from a deity. Or
how do you treat the doshas without treating Agni?
That is a good point. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question, and that's important for us to reflect on. Is that's what we do. That's what Kaya Chikitsa is. That's what we do. Everything we do is treating Agni. Right? Everything we do, because Agni is ultimately what the doshas are in charge of, or like the way that a dosha causes a problem is by attacking the Agni. If the Agni, then it weakens it, Manda Agni, it inflames it up, Tikshna Agni, or messes with it, dosha, Vishma Agni, ultimately calling Vridik, Shai, or Dushti, right? So if we treat the Agni, make it stronger, that takes care of the dosha, repels it, prevents it. Now, I don't want to keep it so simplistic. There's ways that doshas can get around because they can travel. But ultimately, the only way that they're going to cause havoc is by defeating an Agni or weakening it or altering it, right? Great question. It's really, really awesome question. I'm glad someone kind of put that one out. Yeah. Okay, so, you could call disease as weakened Agni's invitation. Right? That's the invitation card to the disease party. Right? Ama is the soil of where the party's going to take place, that apartment. And the disease is whoever happens to come in when they feel invited. Yeah? Yeah, Arafella?
Yeah, I have a question about, I find lots of people, they accept a disease because they say, oh, it's happened through, like it's a genetic disease because it's happened through my family.
Mm-hmm.
And is it true? Mainly, yes, because it happened to your family, there's a genetic component, it's going to happen to you. You can't avoid it. Or my thinking is, okay, there's a predisposition, but it means that you can strengthen it and avoid it. Strengthen acne and avoid it. So it's not, it's not written.
Two things about that. Great question. Very important question. So first of all, it's seen as a kava gunya. It's a weak space in Ayurveda. Okay. And in modern epigenetics, it's seen as, okay, you have a dirty gene or whatever, there's all these books on it, so on. Now, what they found in research is diet, lifestyle, and spirituality actually has the biggest parameter. This is Andrew Whale. This is like big time research. Tons of doctors. Is due to your diet, lifestyle, so on, basically your Agni, and what you do to take care of that, psychological as well as physical state. That determines if those genes get turned on or not. That's cutting edge science. Totally, you can't refute that. That's awesome. It's so supportive of what we've always known. Now, in Ayurveda, that's the whole concept of, we know that, and that's why we do the diet, lifestyle, and so on. But besides that, there's a whole facet called rasayana that heals the defective space. That's to be done after panchakarma once you've cleaned it out. Right? So there's a potential to then heal that in a real way. To kind of like, okay, what is that defective gene? Let's just put up a strong wall there. Let's increase the Agni. Right? And if you're living a good way, then maybe that'll happen. But you know what? There's always karma. Ayurveda also shows karma. Sometimes there's no way we can do that. That's just how it's going to be. Right? So the most important part is, of course, if you get the disease or you don't, to have a calm mindset. Well, not necessarily calm, but and real. Be present with it and ride through what is given to you. Right. That's when we get to yogi psychology. Right? But that will be the most helpful attitude. That will hopefully invite the disease to leave or cut the roots of it. Let me take one more look at a definition to pull things together for you before we then move on. So, first of all, there's aggravation of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. That happens. Right? If we're totally imbalanced and there's no aggravation even there or accumulation, it's very unlikely we're going to get a disease. But that's very rare, right? It's like everybody has something. Even seasonally, we're dealing with that, right? It's natural to have accumulation aggravation, is it not? That's natural. That's part of our human state. It's not like an ideal human would have none of that. No. The first two stages are completely normal. So is really the third stage. Wow, that's a big take home, that these are normal human experiences, and they are going to be experienced because of nature and us and changes. Now, there's a wise way to live that will help us get to the prashanam, to the elimination stage, by living in the cycles of nature, right? That's a big take home right there. That is normal to have imbalance. As well as balance is wonderful, so is imbalance if we know how to work with it. So aggravation of Vata, Pitta, Kapha. For disease to start happen, the doshas find a kavaigunya in a dhatu and start attacking it. So in due course, that can weaken the Agni in various ways, right? The different types of Agni disturbances. And once that happens, what gets generated? Often, not always, but often, ama can be a side effect of that. Okay, because the nutrition then gets messed up, and it starts tweaking the tissue. That amalgamation creates something that's not really healthy tissue, thus causing, first, usually, not always, but functional changes. Okay, like in our systems, excess flow, deficient flow, and then structural changes. That's more end-line, more serious diseases, right? And ultimately, when all that's going on, if it gets through the deeper agnis, like the cellular and DNA agnis, that can then cause the intelligence of the cells to be tweaked. And thus, that's a very serious issue, i.e. like cancer, autoimmune stuff. Okay? Does everybody follow that stage? Doshas, dhatus, agni, weakened, ama, possibly, or it could be nirama, it could be without ama. Right? We'll talk about that in the future a little more. But nonetheless, then there is functional change, then there's structural change, and ultimately the cell's intelligence is confused, perverted, destroyed in some cases. Okay? That's the progress of what can happen. Right? And we encounter people at all the various stages of that. Right? Just a moment. I wanted that to sink in. It's a lot of info, and I hope that gave you a nice definition. Like that's when you want to write out and kind of think about, make sure you get the progression there. Any questions? Okay, good. So let's now look at the classification of disease. This is, if you noticed for the reading for this chapter, I didn't expect you to read everything and you could overview it because it's one that you want to just kind of go back to. But I've kind of reclassified things a little bit to go by the classic text. I remember learning from Dr. Law, and he actually told us where he pulled these out from, so I'm going to share that with you. So first of all, there is, I want to put out the ones that's likely to be talked about in exams and so on, is the main three, the generalized three types of disease or disease classifications. That is Adhyatmika, Audibautika, and Adidaivika. So Adhyatmika is spiritual causes, like past life karma. In modern medicine, they call it idiopathic. They have no idea. Right? Adibautika is physical disease. Okay, straight up. That's what most modern medicine deals with. And Adidevika is more on the psychological level. But also put into that greater category is also bad luck, what appears to be bad luck, coincidence, accidents, right? So here's an example. Anybody, I don't know if any of you are in the zone of that tropical storm Florence. We're kind of close to it, right? And so you have this tropical storm coming. Now, if there's illness, injury, trauma that happens from that, which category is that going to be chalked off to?
Well, it can be both the the physical one, but also psychological, bautica.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a force of nature, right? It's not like, oh, I chose to, if you choose to fly into it, that's one thing, right? But if that's where you're living and it hits, then that's how it is. Or if you're in a place that has spread like epidemic or disease or something like that, right? So it gives us 3 broad classifications, which roughly correspond to spiritual, psychological, and physical. Okay, so that's one classification, and that's kind of generalized to much of Ayurveda. The next one I want to go to, which kind of came from like the hetu, the causes, is from Bhagavat. Bhagavat, who wrote the Ashtanga Hridaya, Ashtanga Samgraha, is a dualistic one, Nija and Agantu. So Nija is kind of within the body-mind complex, arising from there, so doshic, right? Self-generated mental issues, right? Feelings, emotions caused stuff. And then there's agantu, which is coming from the outside. Parasites, external trauma, a lot of things, right? Even like bad food and all that, because our digestive tract is still our skin. It's on the inside skin, but still a barrier. Make sense? So those are 2, again, classifications. That's our Bhagavata. And then the other ones come from Charaka. And that is that list. Let me see, of course. Any of you have your books open? Yeah, okay. Let me go to that just to help you out here. So the broad classifications are on page 49. And now, then we go into like local or specific classifications. Okay, these are coming from Charaka. I remember him teaching about that, or at least I have notes of it. I shouldn't say I remember every class, but yeah, please.
Sorry, are you saying the ones on page 50?
Yes, 50, 51, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that chapter 3?
It is chapter 3, Vyadi, yes.
Oh, okay. Then everybody should have it.
Yes, good. So let's go through those kind of briefly. So Adi Bala Pravritta, right? Genetic, right? So that kind of helps us understand. And this is Adi Bala, before birth. That's what that means. So we came in before our birth. This is what was given to us in a way from our ancestry, etc. So they understood that there was genetic issues. Janma Bala Pravritta. So this is at birth, even during pregnancy. So this is iatrogenic or at birth like trauma that can happen, right? Cerebral palsy can be caused by lack of oxygen, for instance. Congenital disorders, things like this, okay? Then there's dosha bala pravritta, diet, lifestyle, right? VPK, so this can be physical, mental, right? So this is doshic based, right? Which is what we're very used to. That's a classification that we're quite comfortable with. Sangata bala pravritta, accident or trauma. I'm not necessarily going to exact order here, but so that's kind of what trauma medicine, the ER, and emergency room and stuff is well equipped to work with. Right? And then there's kala bala pravritta, so seasonal disorders, so that are associated with seasonal change, with seasons. Like it was interesting how when I lived in India for 4 years, I heard people speak about this very much so. It's like, this is fever season, or this is malaria season, or this is that, because the conditions were right for those type of issues to come up. Like, basically, you don't want to be in the plains so much during when the onset of the rain season in May, mid-May-ish, because then the heat's there, it's humid, it's the perfect environment for breeding of diseases, right? So that's when typhoid starts hitting. That's when fever season is there. Right? So seasonal disorders, that's kind of what they're speaking of. It's a deeper meaning of what they're speaking of here. So, and they could be what's called Vyakpan or Avyakpan, Vyaktam being, it's normal to the season. Yeah, in May, late May, June, getting a fever. Yep, you and everybody else. You know, oh, you got a cold right in March, April, spring. Right? Yeah, it's like everybody else. It's flu season, things like that. Or diseases out of season, right? But how come you're having diarrhea in the winter? That's strange. So that kind of goes back to overhating causes. You've seen that already. Then there's Daiva Bala Pravritta, so supernatural, natural forces. You know, so whether it's more on a spirit level, which they acknowledged, or natural forces like hurricanes, tornadoes, struck by lightning. But this also accounts for supernatural forces, because they did have a belief in possessions and things like that. A lot of indigenous cultures work with that kind of thing.
How would you treat that? That's interesting. I mean, I've known about that for a while, but how does Ayurveda treat spiritual?
Lots of ways, yeah. There's lots of techniques. Mantra, yantra, rituals, burning Shanka Pushpi in a room. It's a herb that is good for that. Shock therapy, trasan. Right? That's kind of also what they do in the West, but they did that in Ayurveda too. There's lots of different things, right?
Yeah, I have a question about that.
Astrologically, yeah.
Well, I had a Christian healer tell me I was being spiritually attacked. I had a Taoist tell me I was being spiritually attacked, and that's why I got sick. The Buddhist Taoist, because they sent me to a Buddhist link about a Gyalpa, which is apparently some sort of demonic and negative entity, and that the cure for this was a mantra.
Yeah.
But say that stuff's true. Why are they targeting you? You know what I mean? Like, why you?
Now, to keep it simple, there's a Kabaigunya and they're invited. That's all. It's a Kabai. Why would a bacteria or pathology target you? You know, it just is, right? It's like and again, then, you know, if you want to look into karma and so on, you can do that too. You know, there could be something that's there, but we could keep it very simple. There's a Kabaigunya. There's an invitation, and that's who decided to come in the door. All right. So, I mean, I hope that answered your question, but just to keep it really simple, and an Ayurvedic perspective, we could keep it simple like that. But then if we wanted to do Vedic astrology, go in, who knows? You'd have to figure that one out. But hey, do the mantra. It's useful. Why not? Do the mantra. I would. Yeah. Yeah, please, Brittany.
So one thing I've heard, and I did a few different, in multiple trainings I heard I've been told that unless you're actually saying the mantra completely correctly, right sounds and pitches and stuff, that it's not going to work.
If that were true, then, boy, it sucks for Tibetans.
Yeah.
Right? And Westerners and everybody else. So I evidently no Tibetan ever got any spiritualization, right?
Okay.
And also, if you know, you can't be spiritually if you're a vegetarian, right? That really sucks for Tibetans, Native Americans, and most other indigenous cultures too, right?
But maybe that's like one of these inherited diseases or things.
What's that?
Like, because they were born some other place, then that is their adhyatmika.
That they can't pronounce Sanskrit well or not get education in it?
You know, like, yeah, right? Because you're saying it's karma, or there's karma as an element.
Well, I'm kind of bringing up that.
That's not true.
I think basically the end result proves the invalidity of that idea, right? Is the Dalai Lama, does he have maybe some good, benefits, or other practitioners, or he's never said the Om Mani Padme Hum correctly.
Okay.
It's like, so it's very, very interesting. I mean, there is a lot of people that hold with that, but is that a little bit of an staunch attitude with that, or is that, is the reality? Ultimately, the next thing is, does anybody that's not classically trained in Sanskrit that does a mantra getting benefit from it, which is 99.99999% of everyone in India and all the sadhus and spiritual teachers you've ever known.
I can say that I have a certain set of mantras that I chant very often, and I'm sure I'm not doing it 100% correctly.
Yeah, sure.
But I can tell you that a lot of things in my life, or even in my mental state, have improved since that practice. And I mean, I used to usually even have OCD, and I don't have that anymore. So I mean,
so you're getting benefit. The proof is in the pudding, right? The proof is in the pudding. One person I love to bring up all the time is like say Neem Karoli Baba. He's like Krishna Das's guru, Ram Das's guru, and so on, right? Did he ever say Sita Ram correctly? Because they say Siya Ram in that dialect of there. That was his mantra, right? But he's also one that coined the term. If you say God's name right once, then you will have experience of God. So it doesn't have anything to do with its pronunciation, as opposed to your attitude, your connection, truly surrendering to that. I don't personally believe, and anyone that says they can prove that to you, I'm not gonna. I think we have enough of the puddings around there that of every single culture out there that disproves that. So don't worry about it. Learn your Sanskrit. Learn it for fun, but don't worry about it being perfect. Mean it. Understand it. Right? That's much more important. Great question. Thank you. I like to put it out there, but it's like I don't want to demean anyone who's also learning Sanskrit, because there is a power in that, and there is a belief and faith in that that's equally strong. But we can't impose that on everyone. It's very, very important. So one other chart that I'd like to, I think I've gone through them all. Let me just make sure. No, I have not. So let me finish this list. So Samsarga Janita is epidemics. Okay. That's a little extra one. That's not on your list. I know Dr. Lod kind of threw that one in. And Swabhava Bala Pravruta, so natural, like diseases that are, that's on your list. That's associated with hunger, thirst, old age, sleeping or not sleeping, death, things like that. Okay, so more like quote unquote natural causes. So that's one way from Charaka, a very important Ayurvedic text, a very key foundational text, that they look at classifying diseases. On page 52, I'd like to point out there's a lovely chart of Ayurvedic disease classifications and modern equivalents, which relatively covers most of the types of modern pathological classification, like acquired autoimmune, congenital, congestive deficiency diseases, so on. Those are the more allopathic modern ways of classifying. And it shows the Ayurvedic equivalents, okay? So there's no standardized system between all cultures at this point, which makes it confusing for all of us, right? When we're trying to be like, oh, let me look up congenital disorder, this or this, because Ayurveda will look at it in a different way, modern medicine. So everyone classifies, even different texts. And I'm sure in a modern system, there's plenty of different classifications too. This is just a kind of conglomerated list. However, that's okay. Right? So we don't have to become pathologists. We just want to know generally what direction to look under when we're looking for diseases. I'd like to mention at this point, though, too, is these are the ones given from the text, but as you then later look on to like Madhava and Dana and other training texts, you see diseases being listed under the shrotas, under organs, okay? And then subdivide under that, under doshic classifications. I'll speak about that a little later too. But that's the most common. And that's common in West too, is the way that you learn diseases most commonly in the West is not necessarily by this list, but by system. Like immunological diseases, digestive disorders, right? So similar in Ayurveda, you learn it by shrotas. Like in Ayurvedic practitioner level, that's what we'll be doing. It's shrotas by shrotas, and then organs, things like that. Okay? So to give you kind of an overview of that piece. The next piece I'd like to talk about is, let me go, I'll use your book too, because this is nice to look at this. On page 54, there's sadhya, asadhya. The concept of prognosis. Okay. First of all, what does that word mean, prognosis? I'll ask you all.
What's your, what's the outcome? What's
Yeah,
the potential outcome?
potential outcomes. Yeah, absolutely, Stephanie. Thank you. So prognosis is the word for potential outcomes. It's important to know that word in Western medical as well as Ayurveda. So prognosis, so in the future, as things progress, how's it going to progress? Is this possible to cure? Is it easy to cure? Is it difficult to cure? Right? It's a good thing to know. Clients want to know, right? Everybody wants to know, right? That, and we have to be careful with that too. We have to be careful not to give people false hope, but also to give them hope, right? So one way, like for instance, there's 3 words associated with that. There's sadhya, there's asadhya, and then there is kashta sadhya. So sadhya means easy to cure. That through clinical experience has been found that in general this is easy to cure, or at least this version of it. Let's say, if it's a Vata type versus a cough or whatever. And then there is asadhya, is incurable. Okay, that's a pretty heavy word. And then kashsadhya may be difficult to cure. Okay, and again, these are 3 very big classifications. There's a lot of gray area in between them. Why would diseases be easy to cure or more difficult to cure? Well, one, yeah, please. No, please, I want to hear from you. Go for it, Brittany.
I think I just got excited because I think
Yeah, please.
How many doshas are involved?
Yes.
Okay.
That's classically what is one of the first things we think about, right? If it's a single doshic disease, can be easy to cure. Not always, but can be. Right? Dual, it's a little harder, right? Triple, very difficult. Triple or incurable. So the triple is associated with things like cancer, etc. Now that does not mean that people with tridoshic disorders mean that they're on the road to death, or gloom and so on. That's not how it is. I have plenty of people that have tridoshic stuff. It just means it's tridoshic stuff unless there's other symptoms and signs showing that. If you have someone with tridosha going and they have signs of cancer, wasting weight, then yes, it is serious. Right? But
also,
yeah, please.
Also, the stage of samprapti, the diseases.
Yes. So stage of samprapti is very important in one's prognosis. Right? Bhakti, beta are difficult, very difficult. Not necessarily incurable, right? Beta doesn't mean that, but it's difficult. We need to do at least panchakarma or other things. Right?
So I just have a prognosis, sometimes hope. I just feel like sometimes people go into the doctor and the doctor's like, oh, you have 6 weeks to live.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe if you hadn't have said that to that person, they might have, not given up. You know what I mean? So that thing
right.
the whole thing of incurable, to me, it's kind of like, should we ever say that to somebody? Isn't there always hope? I don't know.
Yeah, the belief that there's always hope. I think the line of being real, that, saying that this is a very difficult situation and, can be fatal. And please prepare yourself for those circumstances, but also there's always hope. And I'm here to support you in that.
There's a book I'm reading called How Healing Works. I'll post it in the forum. And he's an MD and he started exploring why some of his patients would get better. but he's really gotten more careful about what he says to patients, because
Yes.
if you say, oh, then this is really bad, it can be a nocebo and actually make people worse because they're believing that they're getting worse. So
Absolutely.
there's actually studies that show that people tend to get better if they have a positive attitude about their prognosis and outcome.
Of course. Yes. We all know that, right? And it's been proven now, and studies have shown, right? So yes, that's very important. So I think that's the beauty of it. I mean, I've worked with quite a few people with cancer. I've had clients die, and I even have one client now that may have cancer, and I may be one of the first people catching that. I'm working with the doctor. We're running testing. So it's a reality of life that we're going to come into. But am I supporting, giving him hope, and trying to make, if he is going that way, that's his life as good as possible, right? He's also a wonderful person, a highly trained meditator. So it's a very beautiful thing, right? And even though something may be incurable, doesn't mean that healing cannot occur. If your patient dies, that doesn't mean you failed. Right? If they die and they have a little more happiness, a little more ability to accept that all of us are going to die. If we help them with their attitude in that transition, what a great success, right? I'd love to have that feedback on my post. Well, we've had, many patients die, but they died happily, right? It's like, that wouldn't be a bad, Yelp review. It's important for us to see that, to kind of hold that attitude and help, it's big for us. We all have to, right, take a little time to be with that ourselves, but then be able to then help others and hold that space. Inevitably, we're going to run up against that in our practice, right?
I like this little thing on page 50. It says, Lord Shiva holds a
Trishula, yeah,
which is
trident.
a three-pointed spear representing the three types of pain. If you worship Shiva, you're Adimika, I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can be cured. I like that little.
Yeah. This is, I love to bring to example many spiritual teachers that are out there. There's been so many great spiritual teachers that have lived with cancer and died from it, and so on and so on and so on. Many spiritual teachers die in 60s or younger. Now, amazing. They have these serious diseases, which would be really rippling, debilitating for people. And yes, sometimes they can barely move, but they aren't affected by it. Okay, so I have this disease. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm still serving people. Right? Like even like, let's say the Buddha, he died giving a teaching and trying to inspire other people. Right? He was dying. It's actually in his last breaths, when those are his last words for that benefit. Amazing. Right? Very, very beautiful to reflect on that. Now, yes, there was a potential for suffering, but how much did they take advantage of the potential of suffering? Right? Yeah, okay, it's there, but it's not affecting me. So we have amazing, studies on chronic pain are showing that our mindset, our mental training, mental emotional work that we do, that really affects that. Is it there? Yes, but so there's a lot of research now, as well as concrete examples and historical examples. It's a wonderful subject. So, prognosis. Okay, so it's important to and you all have all demonstrated that you're really well versed in being able to work with people. So this is good. Thank you. Let's talk. I want to show another example of some diseases. I was considering whether I should bring this out or not, but this is kind of something that you're going to see in some of the Ayurvedic texts and some classifications. So 8 great diseases that these are like considered difficult to cure. Okay, so asana diseases. So Vata Vyadi. That's the name for one of those. So Vata Vyadi, Vata disease. And that is neurological diseases, i.e. like stroke, paralysis, right? Very difficult. Very difficult. Not impossible, very difficult. Apsmara, epilepsy. Very difficult to cure. You can manage it. Curing, very difficult. Kushta, leprosy. Although nowadays in modern medicine, that has been curable. right? That went from incurable to curable now, right? Amazing, right? And so we have these great advances that Ayurveda can benefit from. Shofa, which means edema or nephritic syndrome, right? So this is like people that need dialysis or kidney transplants, right? Very difficult to cure. Although I've witnessed it in Ayurveda curing this. I've seen people come off of dialysis because of different herbs and it's amazing. Udara, ascites or cirrhosis, right, of liver. Again, extremely difficult to cure. You can manage it. Gulma. Gulma means a lot of things, but it means like a tumor growth. But gulma, when it's referred to cancer, malignancies, etc., very difficult to cure. Mada meha, so diabetes. In Ayurveda, there's 20 types of diabetes. They've classified into 20 types subcategories. Again, difficult to cure. Some of them, like insulin dependent. We haven't been able, no one's been able to really find the cure for that. So. Raja Yaksma. Raja Yaksma is wasting disease. So this TB, tuberculosis. Have we found an immunization and cure for that, Ross? Yes. Amazing, right? AIDS falls under there, right? Wasting disease. So have we found a cure for that? No, but we've made a lot of advances. We've been able to help people manage it very well.
Would lupus fall into that category too?
Yeah, you know, I would put it autoimmune diseases, although I don't know if they're classically shown in there as a specific category. But yeah, I think that would go into that difficult or uncurable necessarily kind of category. However, there is a lot of potentials of people coming out of autoimmune diseases. It's pretty amazing, more so than the ones I've listed, let's say. So yes, that kind of concludes the section of the different kind of types and classifications. We could also go over synonyms, but I think those are pretty easy for you to read and grasp. Now, the next section I want to go to, there's two more things I'd like to cover with you all, is I'd like to jump back to where we left off in Nidana Panchakam, because we never really did the fifth one there, in Nidana, the concept of samprapti in a general sense. We kind of went into samya samprapti, which is like the stages. So let's take a little look at that. And that was that reading from chapter 1 that I kind of kept deciding, but in this one I want to make sure we go there. So there is, I believe, 8 that are listed here. So there's samanya, which is the generalized pathogenesis, which we went over last class. That's the 6 stages. Then there's shanka. I'm going to list them, then we'll go over. Vikalpa, pradana, apradana, bala, kala, vishesha, and vidhi. Okay, those are all descriptions and things that are important when we're talking about pathogenesis or disease. The reason I'm choosing to put this in right now is because it leads to the next thing of like how, moving forward, we as students in this program and in general are going to look and classify and speak about disease and do research about disease, look up disease, learn about it, okay? So this is from the Nidana Panchakam, this section on Samprapti gives us these tools. Okay, it gives us a few tools that we can mix and match so that we can fine-tune how and standardize, depending on different styles and outlooks, how we as students and practitioners are going to then approach disease for our practices. Okay? So what I'm sharing with you isn't written in stone, but I'm just giving suggestions, and I'm going to give you a pretty full outline from this. So samanya is, yeah, it is important to think about the 6 stages of disease and what stage it's in. Okay, and then there's Sankhya. Sankhya literally means the number or enumeration, like the Sankhya philosophy. But what it's specifically meaning to here is the number of doshas involved. So you can have one dosha, dual doshic, or triple doshic. We just talked about that with prognosis, right? And each of those doshas can have its own samanya samprapti. You can have vata in prasara, pitta in prakopa, aggravation, and you can have kapha in beta. Right? All three can be happening. Right? And that's something to think about, is if someone's presenting with two doshas, which will be common in your practice, what stage are each of those in? Is vata pushing pitta because it's in prasara stage, so it's circulating pitta along with it? Or is pitta just hanging back there? Or has pitta been deposited? Or has vata gone far enough to deposit itself? Right? These are all little fine-tuned questions for you as practitioners. And as you learn about Ayurvedic diseases, some more competent, more skilled, and better writers, which are very few out there, unfortunately, right now, will present that in their description of disease. That's what I look for. I love to look for those things. Vikalpa. This just means qualities. So what gunas are involved with this disease? Right? That's important. You need to, if you don't know the gunas, it's a little hard to decide what kind of treatment to give, what kind of herbs, right? Is it dry? Do you want to get an herb that's more moistening, demulcent, or do you want to give an herb that dries and supports Agni? Because if you give a demulcent herb, that's going to be harder on the Agni. Right? Drier will support more Agni. When we start getting into herbology and start sharing about herbs, you need to learn about that. So you know how your herbs that you choose, like kitchen herbs, for instance, mostly are digestive. They're mostly dry. So they're not necessarily moistening, but that's why we throw in some sweet things like licorice or other things. Next, pradana. Pradana is primary pathogenesis. And then apradana, I'm going to do these two together, is secondary pathogenesis. It sometimes happens, well, here's the first question is, chicken or the egg? Which is the main dosha that we want to choose to combat? It's easier to choose one than try to take on both. So is vata really at the root of things? Is it pushing the pitta? Or is pitta at the root of things? And thus vata got aggravated because pitta was blocking it. It got stuck in our digestion. Vata's then going haywire. Right? So what is it? So that's one question we ask when we think of what's the primary path? What's the best one for us to tackle? Another consideration is, okay, it's fall time and someone has vata and pitta going on, right? Well, pitta is already going to get helped by the fall season, but vata is going to get further aggravated. And if vata is already causing us problems, even if they're a pitta constitution, we may want to choose vata to tackle because it'll be easier, right? So this is about choosing our battles as practitioners, which you often have to do. It's lovely and magical if you make a formula or give them a treatment plan that addresses everything and everything gets better. But that's not necessarily the reality in a lot of cases. Sometimes you just got to give them a strong remedy in one direction to take care of one of the pictures of the puzzle, which for you all and for most practitioners is going to be Agni, getting their digestion working well first. If that's not working well, anything you're giving them is not work so well. Whether it's mental Agni or Agni in the digestive tract. Pradna. I'm going to just pause it here because we're kind of halfway through there. Questions on those first four? Clear? Good. Okay. Bala is the next one. So the next four are going to be Bala, Kala, Vishesha, and Vidhi. Bala means strength or power of the condition. Going back to what we're talking about, I think Stephanie or one of you brought up, well, what if there's like Ebola or some really strong disease? Well, yeah, that has a hell of a bala, right? Really strong bala. Most people will get overcome by that if they're exposed to it. Bala also means strength of the client. If someone has a really strong Agni for that certain disease, someone has an immunization towards tuberculosis, their bala is so strong that that strong disease can't get in. Make sense? I'm using immunization as an example, but it's a good example for this idea. Or any of our Agni, if we have strong digestion, how many of you know people that have such strong digestion and just nothing affects them. They can eat anything, you know. It's like, so they have strong Agni in their digestive tract. They may have plenty of diseases, but you know what? They can eat anything. That's a phenomenon that happens too. So Bala, strength of disease, but strength of the patient, and particularly their Agnis, their immune system, etc. Something to consider. Kala, so duration and timing. So is this an acute disease? Is it subacute? Has it now been like a week or so? Or is it chronic? Has it been going on for a while? So how long has this process been happening? So that's really important, and we have different treatments for that. And then there is also climate. What season is it? When is this happening? Is this happening in its appropriate season? Or is this happening, and can we use seasonal foods to help cure this? Because it's easy. So all of us that are suffering from some summer heat stuff, now that the fall's coming in, hopefully that's going to support us. And now apples are coming into season, this and this. We start eating that. We have a friend, so it makes it easier to deal with that. Right? So that's Kala. Then there's one I really, really like, which talks kind of about Ojas, called Vishesha. Vishesha is location affected, but also our immune response to it. Essentially, our localized Ojas to something. So if we have a head cold and we have a propensity of that, do we have a history of that? Do we have kind of like a propensity towards getting sinus congestions? Maybe our parents always had sinus congestions, and then we too. You know, is there a propensity? Do we have a weakness of our ojas there, our immunity, essentially? Is it hitting our weak spot? Like here's a good example of this is, how many of you have a particular way that colds usually hit you, or flus usually hit you? You know what I mean? Like how many of you are in the itchy throat, sore throat ballpark? Anybody there? Okay, you're in the itchy throat. How many of you are in the nose congestion ballpark? Yeah, me too. I rarely get a sore throat, but oh man, it's gonna hit sinuses for me. Right? So that's what we're talking about. Vishesha. It's a Kavaguni in a way. Like our ojas isn't as strong in those places. So what a beautiful concept. So is it hitting us in our weak spot or not? That's important about disease. And then Vidi. Vidi means overview of the condition. So it kind of brings all this together. Is how do we look at this in a bird's eye view? Okay. So those 8. Again, I'm going to pause. Do you have some questions about those 8? Yeah, please. Yeah, don't feel shy. Let's have a dialogue.
Because it's not so much about the 8, but it's what you said. Because you said, so let's say the sinus is a weakness. So then that is sort of a like, hey, you're weak in your sinus. So what would you do then, knowing that that's a weakness in a client's
Rasayan. Rasayan. So when they're not sick, once they've gotten better, you may want to give them herbs that help restore the nasal lining, for instance. Say someone, I'll give some extreme cases and subtle cases. Like say someone has been doing netra all the time with hot water and too much salt. They may have depleted their lining there. What if, or someone's around, they're a painter, they're around fumes all the time. That could really severely hurt the lining. What if someone's a cocaine user, for instance? That will severely hurt the lining, things like this. Some extreme examples, but some common ones too. So we would then want to give herbs to help build the lining up. They may not be complaining of anything, but they have this propensity to getting sinus infections or pain there all the time. Does that, or infections. So rasya, nasya, doing nasya and the right things, and lubricating oils there. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I have a question because all through my youth, I always suffered tonsillitis, and so much most of my tonsillitis.
Oh, tonsillitis, yes.
Tonsillitis, yeah. And that's when I was living in Italy. I was born in Italy, lived all my life there until my 20s, and then I moved countries, and Actually, it changed when I came to live in UK. That stopped. Now I don't get it often. But before was like once or twice a year. In fact, we're talking about removing the tonsils, and now it's just not happening.
I actually had a very similar experience too. I had like tonsils, but I did get mine removed when I was a kid. It's the standard procedure back in the day. Yeah, unfortunately, but they're an immune organ, right? So they were exposed to something there, and you were fighting it off, and that changed. I can't give you an exact answer, but I can give you a wild guess that you may have adapted or easily adapted to the food and what things that you were given in England more than maybe in Italy. It could be how the food was prepared, or, there's many, many different possibilities. Climate is a heck of a lot different too, right? I don't know exactly where you're in Italy, but UK is pretty, it's a small, kind of smaller, less climate zones there too, so it's pretty like damp and stuff, but that may have helped in your case. Who knows?
Well, yeah, because I was reading now, I can't remember, it was part of the Gatis. They actually, one is the pitta, now I can't remember it going up, then you can have tonsillitis.
Yeah.
It's related to it. So my thinking was being in, I've always suffered the heat. And then my mum is extremely pitta, and I always had, it really threw my pitta out, completely out of balance.
Well, let me ask you one thing, is Italian food versus English food. Did you have a big dietary change when you went over there?
Well, yeah, because I started cooking by myself.
Well, yeah, so
wasn't my
going from pasta
sauce
with pasta sauce, with pasta sauce, with pasta sauce, and this and that in there.
Was a huge, lots of carbohydrates.
Yeah, so Italian diet, I mean, even though you've adapted that, maybe ancestrally to some degree, but still, it's pretty high pitta. Pretty darn high pitta, right? And when you changed, not that English I can't be that too, but it's generally less that. It's more kapha-ish. So it helped, possibly.
Yeah, that was my thinking, yeah.
Great. Yeah, so let me now help us make sense of this and give us some sort of model that we can continue on in this. And again, this isn't written to stone, but I want to give you a way of looking at it. And this will be more or less consistent with the assignment I gave you about choose a disease pathology. You'll see that come up and be posted. To choose a pathology and then find out, do some research on comparing the Western view of this and the Eastern view of this, or Ayurvedic view of this, and then go through these things, these different kind of pieces I'm going to share with you, and try to think it through, and then use that as a template to gauge articles. Because put it this way, 90 or more % of the stuff that's written about Ayurveda out there is junk. People either aren't well trained. Many doctors from India are very poorly trained in it. It's very allopathic, kind of like that, or they're just not including stuff. It's very put out there, and that's what it's a lot of. Now there's some that are extremely good, Western and Indian, of course, but there's just a lot of junk out there. Or people that aren't trained very well or don't have a good background in it. And they're just like, oh, you can have a Vata version, a Pitta version, a Kapha version. Here's this, decide which one, and here's the treatment. That's not Ayurveda. That's a WebMD. That's Ayurveda has much more depth than that. So I encourage you to have a critical eye for your own benefit and your clients, and choose and find sources of articles that are extremely high level, credible, well written by competent practitioners, and include the knowledge that you as a student can learn by, and then you as a practitioner can apply well and intelligently. It gives you ways to critically think and choose. So I've listed some resources, and I'm going to just talk about this really before I get into the subject. For Western stuff, WebMD actually isn't bad. Mayo Clinic isn't bad. Mayo Clinic is actually decent. NIH, National Institute of Research, things like that. You can go onto Google and type in Google Scholar, and that'll give you your specialized search engine to look for research-based articles when you're looking for Western stuff. A bit more credible. than what's Dr. X and a bunch of other stuff that's out there. So not that there's some great stuff, but just in case, there's a lot of misinformation. So choosing your sources is important. Now for Ayurveda, it's a beginning field, but there's some great people out there. Dr. Lad does a pretty good job. He sometimes doesn't get into all the details, though he may know them, but in articles, he keeps them brief sometimes. Of course, any publications with him, and he has like newsletters or things that go out through email. But here's some really good ones who are both MDs as well as Ayurvedic practitioners, and they tend to put some time into their articles with this. Alakananda from alandiashram.org. If you look under their Ayurvedic perspectives, she has brilliant articles, very well researched, and she's a brilliant Ayurvedic teacher. The only one that's been training Ayurvedic doctors in the West.
Can you spell that?
Alandi, ALANDI.org. And I have that in your assignments coming up. Hopefully I'll be posted. That's a great resource. And she has a plethora of stuff, and she has her doctorate students making these things for her too. So it's great. It's really high level. And it includes most of what I'm going to share. Scott Gearson, he's an MD who's been a long-time Ayurvedic practitioner, very well trained, classically trained in Ayurveda, and excellent. So he puts out articles that are very scientific, very well researched, and include the things that you as a student would like to know about this, and you as a practitioner can really apply. Okay? Those are my two favorites. There's a lot of new websites going on, and I'm not going to say too much more because I'm still considering how good they are and the quality of the information. But there's definitely some great ones out there when you do searches. Okay. But those two I've had great luck with, and they really write well, and it's based off of both Western and Ayurveda, but very strong Ayurveda. It's not demeaning Ayurveda in any way. Okay? They are Ayurvedic practitioners first and foremost, or Ayurvedic doctors. Okay? So that's just some hints for you, and I think you'll be very happy with those kind of articles. A lot of junk that's out there. So now let's talk about some of the key things that you're going to want to know when you're looking up disease and pathology and you're thinking about it. Number one, if at all possible, but at least you should think about it, is etiology. So I'll do the Western and then the Ayurvedic terms for this. Etiology means hetu or nidana, cause. What's the cause? Sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. Sometimes there's a Western clear, okay, this is the cause why you get like Lyme's disease is because of tick bite. Okay? But so there's a lot of diseases we don't know. Why do people get autoimmune? Whereas Ayurveda can give some possible causes with the huge list of hetus and stuff. Okay. We should of course be careful about how we speak of that. So we don't want to say we know exactly, but in our minds we can keep in mind, and then we can help them address, maybe remove some of those potential causes. So hetu or nidana or etiology is the word, the Western word for it. Number one. So etiology. Then the next thing is pathogenesis. Okay, so this word in Western, what this means is the course of the disease. So from the causative factors, how does it progress? Okay. So under this heading, when we look at it Ayurvedically, because this is a big word in Western, pathogenesis, we're going to first of all, let me go back first. Step 0 is first of all the definition of disease. What is it in general? But underneath the subheading, there's going to be etiology first, and then there's pathogenesis. Okay, so a lot of articles will be brief about that, but it's useful for you to have a good article that describes the pathogenesis in a Western model as well as an Ayurvedic model. That really helps us. So for instance, asthma. In Ayurvedic model, asthma is seen as kledaka, kapha in the stomach being aggravated, then circulating prasara through the body and lodging in the lungs, causing the heaviness, etc. Okay, but what causes it to circulate? Because kapha doesn't really move, right? So how does kledaka get into avalambaka, into the lungs?
Vata?
Yes, vata. And it is a breathing disease, right? Pranavahashrotas, it's about wheezing and not being able to breathe. So yes, Vata's involved. It's a vicious cycle. Vata gets more and more aggravated as it goes on, or it gets more severe exposure to things. So Cledaka kapha goes into Vambaka depositor because of Vata pushing it. So the most common and typical asthma at some point is Vata pushing kapha, dual doshic. Okay, there could be also pitta in it. It could be harder to deal with. Okay, so that gives you an idea in Ayurvedically of a simple like example of pathogenesis. Again, in the West, they're going to have different ways of speaking about that. So again, pathogen comes in, aggravates the tissue lining of the lungs. It could be an allergen, let's say. And then there's an immune reaction. Right? You will eventually learn anatomy and physiology going into Ayurvedic practitioners. So this will get more and more of this. Okay, it won't be left to me to go over all that with you. Just talk about it. So everybody get that. So that's pathogenesis. Now, under Ayurveda, that still shows us essentially samprapti. Okay, that's where we're thinking about that Sankhya, how many doshas, and what is this, the Samya samprapti, Samaya. So that falls under classical pathogenesis of disease. Okay, that's the second factor. Now, in the Western articles that you're going to see, and in Ayurvedic ones too, there's also going to be a concept of populations affected. You'll see that subheading usually. And this means like who is more likely through studies, like are women more likely to get this? Are young women, older women, men of these ages? Let's say like prostate. Well, that's a male thing, okay? And it's generally older men. So the groups that are more prone for this and the percentages, okay? So you're going to see that a lot of Western studies. Now, Ayurveda also will mention some of that, but it's not as usually emphasized, but usually mentioned. So that's 3, okay? Populations affected. Next that we need to think about is, once we get the pathogenesis, we need to think about the site. Okay?
I have a question?
Yeah.
Can population also refer to occupational diseases?
Yes, of
related
course.
to
I
your
would throw
occupation?
that in there. Yeah. So you'll
Okay.
see occupational disease thrown in that subcategory. Okay.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make sense of what you're going to encounter for you so you can look at it intelligently. Now, under pathogenesis, that broad Western word, we're going to have our classical 6 samprapti. So what stage is samprapti and which doshas, number of doshas, so the idea of sankhya. We're also then going to have dusha, what dhatus are affected. Because if it's a disease, generally it's going to be affecting a dhatu. Remember, dosha and dhatu come together, that's the definition of disease. So what dhatu is being affected? That's something you want to look at. So again, like Kledaka kapha, rasa dhatu essentially, goes into avalambaka kapha, rasa dhatu, and is deposited in there. It's kapha in the deposition stage or beyond, depends how serious the asthma is, right? Moved by vata in the spreading stage at least, if not more, and affecting the lungs. Okay, so you see how there's doshas, the number of doshas, the site is involved, the tissue is involved. So not only are we going to see, remember when I talk about sites, I always want you to remember 2 things. I want you to think about subdoshas and where they're sites, because that's commonly how, when you look at an Ayurvedic pathology book, they're going to be talking about subdoshas. But also remember the main sites of doshas, the sites, you have to think about that too, okay? So half your brain is thinking sites, half your brain is thinking subsites. It's up to you to kind of like mesh them. It comes in practice, okay, experience. Because there may be like, okay, Kledaka kapha, or let's say Pachaka pitta goes to the hips, which is a seat of vata, but not necessarily a subdosha, although it'd be apana. So I know this is overwhelming, and I don't want you to go too far. This is something that we're going to do when you're an Ayurvedic practitioner. I just want you to be aware of it right now, because you're going to be reading about it. When you see a good article, it'll be talking subdoshas, it'll be talking about sites. And I want you to start thinking, when you see a Western article, through your knowledge of Ayurveda, how can you translate it? How can you be the next generation of people that are going to write good articles about diseases? Right? So that's one thing Dr. Lad took great effort into training us to see whatever we come across in Ayurvedic terms. It's a great skill. It's important to start developing. So when you see something, say you can't find any Ayurvedic thing, but you see it in Western one, can you think about it Ayurvedically? Can you then create it? How would you speak about Ayurveda? You all can do that. It just requires a lot of practice and knowledge and putting these skills together, okay? And I will be pushing you towards it by giving you assignments and challenging you. So, site, subdoshas, number of dosha, dhatus. Of course, gunas is important here. Okay, so put that in there, put that under, and that goes into pathogenesis still under that second broad category. And then you may want to think about gati. We mentioned that briefly in the last class about what direction. Okay, just a side note, don't worry about that. A lot of people aren't going to talk about that. Along with sites, organs should be thought about. Remember, the next thing that you're going to want to generalize here is think about what shrota is involved. What generalized system is involved? And that's what organs fall into, is systems. So now we have, just to review, we have generally it's going to be etiology or cause. Then it's going to be pathogenesis, which now includes, in Western, we're going to talk about the anatomy and science of it, pathology of it. In Ayurveda, we're talking about doshas, is ama there, right? Samprapti, and sites of deposition, essentially. Right? So that's what we're going to be talking about there. And a couple other factors I mentioned, but those are the main things. Then we're going to talk about treatment is often mentioned at that stage of articles or research articles. So chikitsa, right? So what are the common treatments? So that's when someone's going to talk about what herbs and what diet or lifestyle is useful for that in Ayurveda, or what medications are given, Western medication. And then ultimately the last heading, main heading I should say, is going to be prognosis. Is this an easily to cure one? Is this kind of difficult? Or is this chronic? Or is it terminal? Things like that. Okay, they're going to talk about in Western. Okay. Within that, there is infinite level, depending on how the person's been trained, what their background is, what their philosophy about this. There's infinite variations, but you're always going to see etiology, pathogenesis, possibly populations, if that's relevant. The treatment, and then possibly prognosis to it. Yeah, if that's relevant. That's going to be the core, the main substructure of each good article that's out there. A little break here. Ask me some questions to clarify this.
So that's for the next assignment?
Yeah, let me actually jump onto exactly how I worded it. Brittany, do you happen to have it like right in front of you? So it'll take me a moment to search it.
We can choose whatever disease or condition.
Yeah, let me get to it. Yeah, let me get to it so I can give you accurate information. Or Brittany,
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, I can.
Okay, because I just spoke up and I twice and nobody heard me the last two times. So
I just heard you now. So.
Okay, I have two questions, but I'll wait for you.
No, please, while we're doing this, please go ahead.
Okay, the first question was about the Kavagunya.
Yes, Kavagunya.
I still have a little bit of a block on the astrology thing, but when I had my Vedic chart done years ago, he said I had a deficiency of sun in my chart and recommended sun mantras as a way to make that up. So would that be an example of an area of weakness where if you're looking at it spiritually, you would use a mantra to kind of shore up that area, and would that actually help?
And sun is associated very much with Pitta and also Tejas. And Tejas is behind your immune reaction.
Oh.
So to correct the immune reaction, doing a mantra to the sun would be, or wearing a stone to it, would be very useful.
Oh.
Oh, yes,
That's very
yes,
interesting, actually.
yeah. And I'm not greatly versed in Ayurvedic astrology, but putting the pieces together makes a lot of sense. So that can
Okay.
help your Agni and local immunity, because depending on where that sun is, which house, that probably relates to what issue you're having.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
There's a
All
whole
right.
medical astrology field. So I did find my here's your assignment. So number one is choose a pathology, find a credible Ayurvedic based article of how it is treated and understood, as well as a credible Western article on it. Compare and contrast the viewpoints in a paragraph or two. That's number one. That's just simply like, what do you feel like? What are the ways and attitudes and ideas that people are approaching this? Okay, that's simple, just kind of more discussion based. The next is, in detail, describe the disease to the best of your current ability using the categories from our discussion. And here's the categories, okay? The ones I listed, and again, this is going to have some variance, but this is a good outline. So first of all, define it. Give a simple definition of what you've chosen. Then hetu, or etiology, or nidana. Right? So etiology is first. Then next, since we're doing Ayurveda here, samprapti, the pathogenesis. So in Ayurvedic terms, give it your best shot. What doshas involved, subdoshas, sites, dhatus, and possibly shrotas or organs. Just give it your best shot. Some of you, it'll be more obvious with certain diseases and harder in others. But I just want you to be thinking that way. The next is purva rupa. Okay. So prodromal symptoms, if they can be found, what would be purva rupa for this disease? What would be like warning bell symptoms that this is coming on? And then rupa, what are the cardinal signs and symptoms of this disease that you know are telltale of this, as opposed to something else? Okay, sorry, I forgot to add those to it. Then types. In Ayurveda, what are the types? It's like in diabetes, there's 20 types of Ayurveda. So don't choose that, it's a lot of work. So 20 types of diabetes. But generally, what you're going to find is doshic variations. Like there's a vata type, a pitta type, and kapha type. More credible, good articles are going to have, the vata pitta types, vata kapha, or much more variation. Hence 20 different kinds of diabetes. Then there's sadhya, or asadhya, prognosis, if available. And then upadrara, okay, this is important too. This isn't always there, but in some diseases they'll have complications. Like, for instance, with diabetes, a complication of diabetes is it can lead to neuropathies, neurology. So secondary conditions that are associated with that primary condition. Okay, upadrara. And then I've just listed general and specific treatments. So just keep it brief to some simple ones, because again, we haven't gone into chikitsa and all that yet. But you could just list of like, what are some simple diet, maybe lifestyle, and some simple remedies that are listed for this. Okay, so don't get too extensive there. I want you to more think about the pathology and how to understand disease at this point. Okay?
I have another question, and maybe it's the end of the class. Maybe just when we talk next, we can talk more about this. What's the difference between having all three doshas like really involved in the disease, but having just like some dosha flare up, but you have a disease in another dosha or two doshas?
Yes.
Like you know what I mean? Like you have.
Thank you. You this is the last subject I just want to briefly speak on. Is you can have three doshic aggravation or issues going on, but all three don't necessarily have to tag team on one disease, right? And that is the case often, unless you're dealing with very serious disease. If all three are tagging on one disease, it's pretty serious. You may have all three, but not have any serious disease. That happens, right? So yes, it is possible. So that brings me to the last little subject is lakshanam. Just to go back to that, I've covered that already. Lakshanam means signs and symptoms. At this stage of your learning, it's so important for you to memorize, and we're going to go over this in later classes, dosha lakshanam. What are signs and symptoms of, especially the first three stages of samprapti of each dosha? So you can recognize that, this isn't necessarily, this can be contributing to a disease process, but isn't part of the disease process yet, or may not be, or may be independent. So I'll help you if you know your dosha lakshanam. So if you open the book, again, I'm going to cover this much later, but later when you open the book, we have to weed out all these serious conditions that are often thrown on the list because they're not relevant to dosha lakshanam. You should know what is signs and symptoms, usually mellow, everyday kind of stuff of doshas. Then you should also know Agni Lakshanam, Lakshanam of the 4 different variations of Agni. Right? You should know Ama Lakshanam. You should know signs and symptoms of Ama very well. So you can distinguish between, is it Ama or is it some of the dosha ones? That's where you really need to shine and memorize as Ayurvedic wellness practitioners and practitioners. Because those are all likely before and very easily dealt with before a disease starts. Because later, in Ayurvedic practitioner, you're going to start memorizing Purva Rupa and Rupa or Vyadi Lakshanam. But before that, there could also be generalized Shroto Lakshanam. In general, if Pranavaha Shrotas is agitated before it's even disease. That's usually Purva Rupa stuff, is Shroto Lakshanam. Right? But then we get into Vyadi Lakshanam, disease, like clear disease, signs and symptoms. That's something that took me quite a while to understand that I never was taught. And it's almost like it's assumed, but they don't really clearly teach that. But I'd like you to know right from the get-go, write this down, that you should know dosha lakshanam. And cut out all the serious diseases that are given those lists. Look at just doshic symptoms. That's what that chart last time in Samprapti is very important because it's much more specific. So stay away from the disease labels. Let's look at small symptoms and signs that are indicative of dosha lakshanam. Think about Agni lakshanam. Think about Ama lakshanam. Tomorrow I'm teaching class on Ama. Please join in if you can because we'll be going over that in depth. And then later we'll talk about Shroto lakshanam, Dhatu lakshanam. And that's kind of be like Purva Rupa, more or less. And then we get into Vyadi lakshanam. That's when you start formally studying classic diseases like Vyakti Beta stuff. Okay?
Are you gonna share the link for tomorrow on the Facebook group again for Alma's class?
So
Oh yeah.
I sent out or Yoga Veda sent out an email a few weeks ago asking who wants to be on the list because we don't want to just like shove a bunch of emails because I know we already send a lot of emails. So for the people that said yes, add me to the list, I took the emails down. So if you didn't receive the email, that's because you didn't add the list, but I can add you now.
Great, thank you. I would love to.
Oh,
Add
sorry.
who?
Would you add me, Heidi?
Yes.
I get so many emails every day. I don't think I must have missed that one.
Yeah, I know. And then sometimes I think, oh, people probably didn't open it, but because we send a lot of emails, but then I don't want to send another one. But so this is cool. I'll add you both, or maybe I'll just add everybody in this module.
And is tomorrow's class at the same time as this one?
Yes. Yes. Well, wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much. And this has been a lovely class. Thank you all of for all your participation. It's been lovely, and all the questions. Like everybody was speaking here. It's really nice. So blessings and namaste. Okay.
Thank you.
You have a good holiday.
Yes, thank you. That's right. I'll be in Poland coming up soon. Enjoy your breaks. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Yeah.
Mark, do you want me to? Well, just if you have anything to say. I don't know.
Quick check-in.
Yeah, quick check-in.
And we can turn a recording on.